My name is Henry Lawson. I was 62 when it all happened, and I've spent my whole life on the west side of Columbus, Ohio, in this one-story brick place on West Broad Street. There's an old maple in my yard that, come fall, turns into a bonfire of red leaves, and the living room keeps a rug that groans in the same spot every time, right under the frame with our wedding photo, me and Margaret. Nothing in this house surprised me for decades. I know every noise it makes the way you know your own knee going down a step, until the night my son pushed me into the guest room. It was a Tuesday, Brittany's fried chicken still greasy in the air, the TV blaring a preseason game. The leather couch creaked under Kyle's weight, and me leaning on the arm of the chair, chewing slow, because the things that matter don't need hurrying. He stood up with his hands on his hips like he was about to announce a win. He brought a verdict. "Dad, we're going to reorganize things," he said, using reorganize like you're just sliding a book from one shelf to another. "Brittany and I need the main bedroom. Her back's bad, the bed in here is better. You get it, right? The guest room's got everything you need." I looked at him the way you stare at a map you've known since boyhood, and find a road with a sign that reads closed. The main bedroom had been mine since 1999. I hung those blue curtains. I hauled the bed when Margaret said she couldn't take the spring squealing anymore. And all of a sudden, I was a guest in my own house. I answered slow, tasting each word so it wouldn't slip off my tongue. "You two need it, and I'm supposed to understand." Brittany walked in with a ponytail pulled too tight, arms crossed, that catalog smile glued to her face, all wrapped in the vanilla candle smell she paints through the house like makeup for the air. "We're not kicking you out, Henry," she began with the sweetness you use to get a kid to swallow medicine. "It's just practical. We can move your things tonight. We even made room in the closet." The word practical hit me like a cabinet door that won't latch and smacks your shoulder. Kyle didn't wait for a yes. He grabbed my dresser and dragged it, the wood screaming across the floor, the very sound I used to tell him not to make when he was little. In no time, my bedside clock was blinking on the nightstand in the small room, the yellow lamp lighting a wall that had never been mine. That's when he came back with a blue folder. "And another thing," he said, fanning the folder like a hand fan. "Tomorrow a woman's coming with some paperwork to update the house documents. Just signatures. Simple stuff, okay? Making sure everything's tidy. Just signatures and simple stuff. Don't walk hand in hand when they show up with a condescending smile and an office folder." I didn't argue. I thanked them, kept quiet, tucked Margaret's photo under my arm and carried it to the guest room. She looked at me from the frame with that question I know how to translate. "You gonna let this happen?" I lay down, but I didn't sleep. Ice clinked in Kyle's glass. Brittany's phone popped with that annoying delivery app chime. And I stayed there like an old rock the rain keeps polishing. When the kitchen clock made that little click for the third time in the dark, I got up. And I let a decision be born in the time it takes a man to bring coffee water to a boil. If you've got a mother, a father, or grown kids living at home, listen. What I did the next day saved more than a bed. It saved the roof over my memories. If that hits you, stay with me. Because little did I know that shove would open a door I hadn't touched in years, the one that leads back to being my own man. I've always been the kind of man who keeps tools in coffee cans. I grew up knowing a wrench does a lot of jobs and a promise is forever. Margaret proved that just by being here. She had a Sunday voice, barely any makeup, the clean trace of coconut soap on her fingers, and a way of smoothing the leather couch that made a gentle shh. We bought the place on West Broad when Kyle was 7. The mortgage was steep for a guy who made a living swapping belts and building engines, but I did the math with a pencil on a napkin and talked us into it. We can swing it. And we did. I did what a father does when the world gets too expensive. I sold my old F-150, the one that still smelled like burnt oil and highway stories, for a little over $2,800 to cover Kyle's overdue tuition at Ohio State. I swapped a truck engine on the shoulder in January, hands going numb, just so we wouldn't come up short on gas money. Back in 2011, I refinanced the house at a rate that gave me heartburn, just to shovel down his avalanche of credit card debt. I put my name in as co-signer on more than one account I never used. And I added my son back onto my insurance plan for a few months that turned into years, with a monthly add-on that floated between about $130 and $143, depending on the insurer's mood. If I said I don't regret it, I'd be lying. If I said I'd do it all again knowing where it led, I'd be insulting the skinned knees I patched with mercurochrome when he was little. Love without brakes turns into a truck barreling downhill, and the brake sometimes is paper. I kept a metal file cabinet in the closet of the main bedroom. My closet, always mine. Inside, a gray folder with my papers, the house title, an old will, insurance policies, and a paper I drew up in a moment when I tried to be prudent, a transfer on death deed, naming Kyle to get the house when I was gone. I did it in 2016 on a fall morning, went down to the Franklin County Recorder, got a stamp, and came home thinking, there, one less worry. I'd forgotten about it, because it's the kind of paper that exists to soothe you after you've vanished. Lying there in the guest room, with that menthol balm Brittany dabs on the pillow, I remembered. That deed was revocable. I just had to decide. Just had to get up and go to the right place. Just had to stop trying to be the man who always gives in. I picked up the phone, left a message for Evelyn Price, the attorney who helped us when Margaret got sick. She's in Bexley, works with folks all over Franklin County. It was the middle of the night, she wouldn't pick up. I didn't need her to, I just needed my own voice saying what I'd already decided. Recorder's office, revoke the TOD, revoke the power of attorney. Because yes, in a lapse of good faith and plain naivete, I'd given Kyle a broad power of attorney to handle things if I got ill. I never needed it, but his signature had been sleeping easy on my paperwork for years. I brewed coffee in an old carafe, opened the kitchen door, and let the autumn light slant in. The hallway had the same familiar squeak. The change was in me. While the water dripped through the filter, I sorted the last few months like screws into a tin. Brittany negotiating with the neighbor to swap out my curtains for modern ones. Kyle suggesting I hand over my grocery card so he could speed up the shopping, then showing up with a statement for about $287 and change, craft beer and snacks for a game I didn't even watch, the mailbox spitting HELOC flyers, numbers gleaming like bait, tap your home for up to 83 grand, and me thinking, why does this crowd know my name? Without noticing, my life had turned into a bargain counter where everyone wanted a piece, except me. I got dressed with the unhurried care of sanding wood, flannel shirt, pants with worn knees, my cane propped by the door, more for pride than for need. The sun had barely lifted when I laid my hand on the door jamb, tucked Margaret's photo into the inside pocket of my jacket, and promised her, low, no love, I won't let it happen. Little did I know that a few hours later, when the paperwork lady sat at my table with those silver pens, I'd show that my hands still knew how to hold a pen with the right kind of steadiness. And that practical sometimes means not being nice. The morning before the notary arrived felt like a strange little play. I heard Kyle and Brittany whispering in the hallway, saying, it has to be today, and we can't push it. And the sound of that blue box opening and snapping shut. Brittany moved around like a store manager before an inspection, straightening frames, flipping rugs, forcing a plastic kind of normal. The sweet vanilla candle fought with the sting of disinfectant she scrubbed into the tabletop, like Shine could sweet-talk a document into signing itself. Dad. Kyle showed up in the guest room doorway, tapping twice with his knuckles too quick. She'll be here around lunch, okay? Super quick. Quit claim deed. Simple stuff. We just want to avoid confusion down the road. Even Chris from the bank says it's best. Chris from the bank? My question came out smaller than my curiosity. A friend, he said, trying to hide the panic. But look, just sign and done. You won't regret it. Mm-hmm, I answered. The sound Margaret made when she was about to say no with grace. Kyle's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Chris, home loan. Chase fraud alert. Credit union. He flipped it face down like a teenager in class. Grotesque doesn't cover it. Insulting comes closer. I saw a printed bill left on the counter with a red circle around a little over $112, labeled Target Essentials, and thought, Since when are diapers and scented candles essentials in my house? What needed protection here wasn't the future, it was my deed. With every step came a fresh micro-humiliation elbowing in. Brittany offering me a list to organize my clothes, because the guest room has less space, like I was a guest in my own body. Kyle explaining slowly that it's normal for people your age to forget things, and that signing now avoids a headache, like I was a child losing the thread. A polite word said with contempt stings worse than a shouted one. I filed it all into a mental drawer marked bills due. But I was running a different kind of math too. The price of every favor I'd paid over the years flickered up in my head like old gas station signs. A little over $2,800 from selling the pickup. 6 late OSU tuition payments I covered out of the emergency stash. Close to $800 for a prescription the insurance wouldn't touch. The just 3 months insurance add-on that turned into about 2.5 years. And the quiet uptick on every utility bill. $3, $4, $5 extra, because more showers ran hot at midnight and the porch light kept getting left on till morning. Numbers that hurt not for their size, but for what they point to. Ingratitude, the kind of ledger that never shows on a bank statement but still weighs on the heart. Little did I know. And I repeat that because some truths only show themselves after life slices you thin. That the Chris home loan banner was just the loose end they were trying to tug. And that by day's end, the most important word in my house wouldn't be practical or quitclaim. It would be recorded. I left early, very early, with my coat zipped to my chin. Parked on East Main, walked down to the Franklin County Recorder, pushed the door and went straight to the counter. The clerk, a woman with a badge that said Janelle, looked over her glasses and smiled with the gentleness of someone who's seen a lot of folks tangled in paper. "How can I help you?" "I need to record a new transfer on death deed and revoke the old one. And I also need to record a revocation of a power of attorney," I said, pulling from a gray folder the documents Evelyn, my attorney, had reviewed with me over the phone earlier and emailed so I could print them at the corner shop. Janelle checked, stamped, stapled. I felt my chest drop a full step in relief when I heard the thunk of the stamp hitting paper. The new TOD named my niece Emily Harper up in Dayton as beneficiary. The POA revocation took back the power I'd handed Kyle in a fit of trust, not revenge, a course correction. Before heading home, I stopped at the community substation on Sullivan Avenue and asked about a civil standby. I laid out the situation, no drama, just facts. Sergeant Carter, square jaw, eyes like a windowsill you can set your hands on, steady, was clear. "You're the owner. If anyone gets aggressive or tries to pressure you to sign, call. We'll send a unit to keep things civil. Evictions are civil court, but keeping the peace is ours." He gave me a card with a direct number. I pocketed it like a dry match on a rainy day. Back on West Broad, as the living room clock ticked its lazy tick and the sun slid through the kitchen window, the doorbell rang. A woman in a cream blazer, lapel badge reading Notary Public Cheryl Byrne, stepped in with my son and daughter-in-law behind her. They turned my table into a dealership counter. Silver pens, cups of water, trained smiles. "Dad, this'll be fast," Kyle said, nudging a stack of papers my way. "It's a quitclaim deed to keep things simple. It's better for you if the house is in my name. Ours, right, Britt?" I raised my hand the way you ask for the floor in a room that's forgotten how to laugh. "Before anything," I said, sliding out the stamped copies, "I went to the recorder. I revoked the document that put you as beneficiary when I die. And I revoked the power of attorney. Whatever that is you've got there, it's not happening on my table." Kyle went pale. Brittany went 2 shades redder. The notary, a pro, eased back an inch and squared her stack like gathering dropped cards. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. I just set my finger on the stamp that spelled the morning's work in plain letters. Recorded. "You promised us," Brittany fired off. "You said you'd help. This is emotional abuse, Henry." "Abuse," I said, slicing the syllables like I'm cutting bread, "is moving me out of my bedroom and calling me a guest in my own home. Abuse is hiding your plan to make me sign away my house under the word practical." "Dad," You're being dramatic. Kyle tried that soft voice he thinks he got from me. I just want to make sure everything's right. You've been forgetting things, and somebody has to step in. What I forgot, I said, my hand open over the papers, was that I gave you the easy road too many times. Remember when I sold the truck to pay your tuition? Remember when I refinanced to swallow your debt? Remember the room you stayed in till you were 26? I remember all of it. And today I remembered I can still protect myself. I turned to the notary. Cheryl, nothing will be signed today. She understood, capped the pens, thanked me with a nod, and left. My son tore the quit claim halfway through the word quit. Useless theater. The stamp wins. Tearing just makes confetti. Fine, he said, slapping his palms on the table. But we're keeping the main bedroom, that's already decided. I opened the second envelope Evelyn and I had prepared that morning, unhurried. A notice to quit, 30 days. I set it on the table. You're here as a favor. No rent, no lease. I'm pulling the favor. You've got 30 days to move out. And Kyle, if you raise your voice or lay a hand on me, I'm calling Sergeant Carter right now. The talk ends. The boxes begin. Kyle's phone rattled on the wood. A banner. Chris Home Loan. His face blurred into panic. I didn't ask who's that again. I looked and decided. I dialed the number on the card. The sergeant answered with the kind of calm you only find in people who know how to hold what needs holding. Officer, I've got a notary who's already left, an agitated son, and a house that's mine. Could you send someone to keep things civil? A little later, 2 cruisers pulled up. Officer Delgado and Officer Price came in with the kind of quiet that fits a crisis. Disciplined. This is a civil matter, Delgado said, after hearing me out and looking over the papers. But in here, we keep the peace. Everyone's going to calm down. No one's forcing anyone to sign anything, and if you gave them 30 days, that stands. Brittany grabbed her purse. Kyle huffed, but they left. On the sidewalk, she tossed it to an audience of nobody. We're going to sue you, Henry. Sue is a word insecure people throw like a rock into a lake to see if it makes waves. I shut the door, and the house settled into the silence I know is mine. Little did I know, but now I did because the hands on my inner clock had started moving the right way again, that 30 days would turn into more than a deadline. It would be a line, and before long, my counterpunch wouldn't be a shout. It would be public. The weeks that followed were a parade of cardboard boxes, packing tape ripped up in anger, and looks trying to cut through me like a flea market knife. I mowed the lawn with my usual care, listened to the Browns on the old kitchen radio, called my sister in Dayton, and asked her to swing by one day for coffee and silly laughter. I also went to the bank and shut the doors they'd been walking through without knocking. I removed Kyle as an authorized user on my card. I pulled his car off my insurance, something I'd kept for convenience that had been costing me about $40 extra every other month. I called the credit card company and disputed a charge for about $268 at an electronics store I've never set foot in. No jury required, just a pen, a phone, and patience. I also dealt with Chris Home Loan. I dialed the number that had popped up on Kyle's screen in one of those banners. I didn't speak as a father. I spoke as the owner. This is Henry Lawson. I've been told someone tried to run something using my house as collateral. I want it on the record that no one has my permission to do that, especially my son. I am the sole owner. Any attempt like that is fraud. We're recording, right? On the other end, a young voice, too confident for what it was saying, tried to slide sideways. Mr. Lawson, I can't discuss. You can jot one thing down. The title's in my name, TOD updated, power of attorney revoked. If you get any request with a scanned signature, call me. I'll show up with my papers. And if someone pushed this through, it's called financial abuse of an older adult. And the State Commerce Department loves that kind of case. The word older stung for a second. It passed. I used it like a hammer on a nail, steady and right on target. But I didn't just want to shut doors. I wanted to turn on lights. I went to my pastor, Reverend Mitchell, a bearded man who smells like coffee and books, and asked, "Let me tell a story at Wednesday night group about respect and signed paper." He nodded. And in the church basement, with the warm smell of cornbread and drip coffee, I told it. A father, a house, an attempt to turn love into a deed, and how you protect yourself when love fails. I didn't name names. I gave facts. I talked about TODs, how to record one, how to revoke a POA. I talked about a civil standby and how there's no shame in asking for help. When I finished, a lady in a lilac coat squeezed my hand and said, "My grandson tried to talk me into putting his name on my car. I'm going to reread my papers." The satisfaction I felt wasn't revenge. It was usefulness. I also wrote a post for our neighborhood on Nextdoor. No names, no winks, just care. If you've got family suggesting a quitclaim, think twice. Call the recorder. It's quick and hurts less than watching someone shove your bed into another room. If you want, message me, I'll point you to the window. Some people laughed. Some thanked me. Some asked for Evelyn's number. Someone called me bitter. I chose to hear the neighbor at 118 Donna telling her husband in the yard, "Henry's right. You don't earn a house by shoving an old man." Voyeur satisfaction? Maybe a little. It's human to watch the mask slip and think, I still know right from wrong. In the meantime, I heard Brittany on the sidewalk on her phone let this slip. The cheapest U-Haul runs about 70 a day with unlimited miles. And I thought, the money they tried to pull with paper was now going to gas, boxes, and pizza for the movers. That's the tab that never balances, the shortcut. It always charges a toll. About 4 weeks in on the notice, Brittany hired 3 neighborhood guys in a U-Haul pickup. The sound of packing tape kissing cardboard became a steady soundtrack. Kyle spent the morning on the phone with someone who called him man every other sentence. Near noon, he knocked on my door. Red-rimmed eyes, voice frayed. "Dad, we're not finding a decent place. Prices are..." He rubbed his neck. "Can you give us more time?" In moments like that, the voice you hear isn't the man in front of you. It's the boy in the Scooby-Doo t-shirt asking for 5 more minutes at the park. I breathed. Spoke softly so I wouldn't wake old anger or blind pity. "I'll give you another 7 days, on one condition. Family therapy. You book it, I'll go to the first one. We listen to someone from the outside. Then we'll see if there's a path. No therapy, no extension." I wrote the condition on a scrap from the napkin drawer, signed it, asked him and Brittany to sign. They promised to schedule. They didn't. On the exact day those 7 days were up, they left. No final yell. Just tires crunching on gravel and a silence that at first hurt like catching your fingernail in a door. Silence that feels like abandonment, but is really room to breathe all the way in. I didn't stop there. I wrote a simple piece for the church newsletter on financial abuse of older folks, phoned a columnist at the Columbus Dispatch who writes about neighborhood life, and told my story without names. She ran it under the headline, "When Love Needs a Stamp, How to Protect Your House Without Becoming the Villain." I read the comments, a bit of everything. What mattered was an email that came in plain letters. My dad got pushed into the garage. Today I moved him back into his bedroom. Thank you. Some wins don't show up on a bank statement. This was one. Days later, Aaron, a young guy from church I hire for small repairs, found a forgotten box in the guest room closet, a key fob that said, "Home Sweet Home," a crib store receipt, and a refinance pre-approval letter for a little over 83 grand with my house as collateral. I held that paper the way you catch a screw that almost skittered off the table. Too late for them, right on time for me. Little did I know, and honestly, by then I knew and smiled inwardly, that the talk in that church basement, the next-door post, and the stamped "no" at the recorder had done what a counterpunch needs to do. Warn, expose, disarm. No smear, no posters. Just turning on the light. Villains can't stand a light blazing from above. 2 months passed the way Ohio seasons pass. Suddenly the wind shifts. The maple out back put on fresh leaves. The sparrows went back to bickering along the fence. And morning light found the nightstand in the main bedroom again. The lamp Margaret chose, clicking on with that old whisper of a switch. I filled the house with the smell of nutmeg and Christmas turkey, laid out the red tablecloth she loved, set one extra plate, just out of stubbornness, and ate in silence without crying. I washed the dishes, dried them with a kitchen towel that's seen more than it needs to, and sat down in the armchair. I picked up pen and paper. I wrote a letter. Kyle, you pushed me into the guest room in my own house. That hurt more than any signature could have healed. You tried to fix your life using my deed. I fixed mine by remembering who I was. I don't wish you harm. I wish you a mirror. Here's an invitation. Therapy. You book it, I'll show up. Until then, my door is a line you cross with respect, or you don't cross it. Dad. I didn't send it. I filed it in the gray folder with the stamped papers from that October 12th. Some things we write to remember the choice we made. Others we live with our bodies, walking the house and feeling the floorboard creak in the same old spot, like a friend reminding you who you are. Early spring, the doorbell rang. I opened it. Kyle stood on the porch. No folder, no salesman's smile. Less hair, less bluster, more eyes. He held his cap in both hands like he was holding bad news. Dad, I'm going to therapy. Brittany, we split up. I thought I could fix wrong by rushing. I can't. I came to say I'm sorry. Sorry isn't paper. It doesn't get a stamp, but it weighs something. It lands on your shoulders and on the floor at the same time. I put my hand on the door jamb, felt the cool wood, felt the whole house looking through me and saying, "Go easy." "I'm listening," I said. "And I have boundaries, they're not punishment. They're doors on hinges, we can open them together. But I keep the key." He nodded. We sat on the porch step, the wind moving the maple leaves, and I lifted out of me the stones I'd stored. I talked about the little over 2,800 from the truck, the cold midnight tire changes, the fear that hit when I saw the blue folder, the insult of calling me practical when I was father. I talked about the stamp at the recorder, kind Janelle, and Sergeant Carter's card still in my wallet like a promise that I can ask for help. I talked about love, said you don't buy it with a signature, and that respect isn't a piece of furniture you shove from one room to another. Respect is a foundation. "I'll go to therapy," he said, quiet. "I'll live without shortcuts." I didn't say, "I forgive you." I said, "I'm staying." Because staying in this case was the choice that worked like a toast. A toast to freedom. A toast to the house. On a random Friday at dusk, I sat on the porch with a small pour of bourbon, the ice ringing like a tiny bell. Looked at the sky painting West Broad orange and toasted Margaret, Emily, Evelyn, Sergeant Carter, Janelle, Aaron, Reverend Mitchell, the lady in the lilac coat, the neighbor at 118, every person who, without knowing it, held my hand while I raised my pen. I toasted the no that saved my yes. The main bedroom stayed mine, morning light on the nightstand. The guest room stayed made up, blanket folded, linen clean smell, waiting for visitors who show up for love, not for opportunity. On the living room wall, I put a new frame on the family photo, not because the people inside changed by miracle, but because I changed the frame I used to see what happened to us. The deed stayed where it belongs, with me protected, tucked away, secondary to the most important document between me and my son, the word. The transfer on death deed? It still points to Emily, my niece for now. It's not a prize. It's a guardrail so I don't get shoved out of what's mine. If the day comes when Kyle returns with respect, with therapy in his backpack and shoulders ready to carry responsibility, I know the way to the recorder. I know Janelle's window. I know the pen I use. On the fridge, I stuck a clipping from the notice to quit that was left over from printing, held up by a magnet next to the grocery list. Milk, bread, coffee, and Emily's number. It's not pretty. It's a reminder. Every time I reach for ice, it tells me, respect isn't furniture someone shoves from room to room when it's convenient. Respect is the house, and the house here is still mine. And if anyone listening to this all the way to the end has been shoved into the guest room inside their own life, know this. There's paper, there's a stamp, there are people, and there's you. you're still there. It's what I learned when I set my hand on the stamp, asked a sergeant for his card, and realized that revenge, when it's family, isn't about wrecking things. It's about rebuilding the wall in the right place. No drama, no shame. Firmly. With love saved in your pocket for when it makes sense. You wouldn't believe what I did the next day. I just did what a father has to do when a son messes up badly. I stopped. I said no. And I opened the door so that one day he can walk back in. With respect. With a home. With a name that never disappears off any deed, because a child's name isn't erased. It gets rewritten on the right side of the door. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about the story in the comments. See you in the next one.